Instead, operating with some, even if it's not like a hard constraint, like, you look up, oh, I flipped over a 5 and I lost. So I go and I look on the 5 table. Oh, look, my leg's been slashed
Right.
open. I'm not talking about
Yeah.
anything. That's why I'm saying I'm not talking about anything that necessarily, well, kind of boneheaded, right? I mean,
Right.
we're not
Right.
I'm not talking about that. But
Well.
if you have to take one little thing
Hmm.
from it that goes into the stuff you are free to say, it's magic then. I mean, now
Right.
you have this sense of consequence, grounding. Here's what's happened to me. And it also means you can role play. You have to role play
Right.
how your character deals with that.
Right.
And that's far more intuitive, far more in the moment, far more genuine than going, well, gee, I better placate the divine magistrate's been kind of an asshole. I better start trying to figure out, like, how he can take away some of those monster points or whatever. You know what I mean? I mean, you don't need to be thinking at that grand level. At the moment, as written, thinking about that grand level is all I've got as a player.
Right.
Does
Right.
that make any sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. And again, you're now making me think of certain mechanisms I removed that maybe I should put back because it used to be that. See, it's funny because one of the things that I did is I said, oh well, maybe I mean I'm giving you right, I'm giving you the direction. Things are getting better, things are getting worse, right? And I thought maybe like just that rhythm of well, you decide what better and worse is for you. You've got like the constraint is right. You can't be carrying around so much black cards and just describing nice things, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
the constraint is oh I'm clearly like in the negative here,
Mm-hmm.
right? So there's that conceptual constraint, but I could bring it down a level because there was a thing where it was very specific because there's still remnants of this where I was talking about how like the threats tend to be either objects, messages, or creatures. Um, and at one point, there was very specific things that you had to do to deal with an object, a message, or a creature, right? Creatures always injured you in some way, and you had to write down like I've been injured, right? Objects, forget what it was with objects, like something like it wasn't maybe even for you. It might have even been environmental. Like objects always, damage the environment in some way, like as you're dealing with them, like or you
Mm-hmm.
trip over something in the environment, like they're environmental. And
Mm-hmm.
messages were more psychological. Like you had to like that would be like the headache or the
Right, right.
whatever, right? Uh,
Huh.
and so yeah.
Well, you
So
see
and then
it.
and then
Go
again,
ahead.
yeah. So again, I sort of like it's funny because what I did was is like I was going to like maybe I should stop telling players what they should say with their characters. Like
I
maybe I should
completely
just
hear
let
you
them
about
see.
that because of what
Yeah.
I'm going to say is actually acknowledging why you took them out.
Yeah.
So, keeping in mind that why you took those things out, I see. Because they were
Hmm.
too much like what I described. On a victory with this number, go to this table. On a defeat with
Yeah.
this number, go to that table. Read what it says on the table, right? Okay, and then
Yeah.
you see what I mean? I mean, I agree. Both of those, as
Mm.
you described them, were too much like that, right? I
Yeah.
get that. But what about very, very minimal? In fact, almost too minimal versions of those, so that what they provide is an oblique or a non-finalized,
Hmm.
but yet usable piece of either fictional information or some sort of incapacity of yours. That whatever it is you do next, it's not going to be this. So
I think I'm
like
trying to
like
try
you
something
can't
more
run,
minimal.
right, or something like that.
Yeah.
Whatever it was,
Okay.
you can't run. Or
Right.
so something you can't do, or something concrete in terms of uh the something concrete in terms of, okay, given whatever it was, um there's the this is very, very spitballing, and I'm not even sure if it's a great
Mhm.
example, but very much in the sense of, there's half of, the sentence that was said to you, that your father said to you or something, right? It means your father was in the
Right.
flashback. You remember
Yeah.
half the sentence that your father said to you,
Mhm.
right? Or do you see what I mean? All of these are things that you can complete or you can operate on as context for how you do things next. I'm not
Right.
sure if the second example was very good, but I'm trying to think of things
Mhm.
that aren't injuries. Um,
Mhm.
but the idea, though, is that you're working perhaps with incomplete things or with oblique things, things that having upon whoever or whatever provides it to you, text, whatever, that provides it to you, maybe you pick out of a list, maybe you make something up that has certain criteria. I don't know. But
Mhm.
whatever it is, you're like, okay, I didn't make this up entirely.
Right.
Now I'm living with it as the way I play this character.
Mhm.
And that's the only reason why I say the hit point logic has something to it.
Mhm.
When all is said and done,
Mhm.
hit points do affect the way you play your character, even though how you let it affect the way you play your character is up to you.
Okay.
That's what I'm talking about. You have to deal
Mhm.
with it. But nobody's telling you
Mhm.
exactly what it is. Nobody's telling you exactly how it's supposed to affect what happens next.
Right. Yeah.
So if you
Yeah. I
take
guess
either of those things you just described and turn it
yeah.
into that very minimalized version,
Mhm.
then I
Okay.
think,
Well,
right,
okay. So let's work with an example, especially what I would consider the hardest example, which is that going back to the toy that floated up, right? So I've played a card, turned your card over. It's not going well for you, right? Um, but we know it's an object, right? We know it's the toy from your flashback that's floating on the water, right? We know that it's impacting you badly, right? You're saying there needs to be one more piece of thing in there to help you decide like what that means for you.
right. But and again, I don't know. As I say, we've got a spectrum of the way these things work from the history
Right.
of role playing.
Yeah.
Boneheaded one, read it off the table,
Yeah.
and it's highly specific. And now you have a -1 card draw on your next draw.
Right.
You see what I mean,
Yeah.
right? And
Mm-hmm.
then you have way over on the other end something that is almost a haiku,
Right.
right? And it has no, I mean, who knows? Maybe you're supposed to pick up a book of Japanese haiku and like open it randomly and put your finger down on it and read what it says. And you're supposed to incorporate it some way, some goddamn deconstructive thing like that.
Right.
Okay. So do you see the spectrum I'm talking about, though? Right?
Yeah.
Right. Um,
But it's still an element, but it's still an element outside
right.
of
Exactly.
the value and the fiction we have in the moment, right? Because
Right.
in some way, the
Well,
object is the haiku. It's like now
no,
interpret
I get
this and
that. I get that completely. So
yeah,
that's why I would
yeah,
I wouldn't want to go all the way down toward the first end of the spectrum, but I would
yeah,
lean that way. I would
right,
lean toward things like, and now I can't run.
right, right.
I would
Okay.
lean that way.
Mm-hmm.
Because of exactly what you said. We've got all the weirdness we want, right, already.
Right,
So,
right.
so if you have something in that zone,
Mm-hmm.
and I am not saying a word about like how. I mean, the person who's probably put the most thought into when and how this can be fun rather than just like either arbitrary or over programming is
Yeah,
probably Jason Morningstar. Because he
yeah.
loves his weird little fucking phrases that then you have to run with, right? I mean, he makes
You're right.
hundreds of them for his games.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I'm not as good at it as he is, and certainly
yeah.
we design toward our strengths. But that's sort of the kind of content I'm thinking of is those nasty things that you like find in the plant, right?
Right.
But I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I
Yeah.
mean, it could be a list. It could be things you draw. It could be things that aren't even said. It just tells you how to make them up,
Right.
right? And so
So
and you have to
you're
obey
saying
that.
something like, so it seems like you're even saying that something like with objects, right? If you're losing with them, you have to carry them around. It might still be too specific, right? Like,
Not really. I mean, I don't
yeah,
know. Again,
yeah,
I'm not
yeah.
sure where we are on that spectrum. If we
Right,
move
right,
toward that front end, then yeah, it says you have to carry this around. You're like, what? I
yeah,
do? And you're like, yeah, you do. Role play your character is
yeah,
having to do it. You're done. Right?
yeah. Especially if I keep hitting you with objects, you have a backpack full of weird. You're literally carrying
Yeah, I
your
know.
burden.
Exactly. I mean,
Yeah,
how I don't see a problem
yeah.
with that. I mean, the fiction's great as far as I'm concerned, right? I mean,
Right,
how
right.
Dante-esque can you get? You show up to the one, you show up to the one-on-one, and your friend says, "What the hell is that?" Right?
What is
I
that?
have
Yeah.
to carry it, man. I have to carry it. I can't let this go. Right? I mean,
Right,
Jesus.
right,
So
right. Yeah, yeah.
I mean, that the fact that we're enjoying that kind of envisioning sort of tells us something, right?
Right.
That's like,
Yeah. Yeah.
maybe that is sort of that kind of zone on the spectrum, however it's done procedurally.
Right. Yeah.
So with that in mind,
Yeah.
it also leads us to say, okay, now we can finally talk about scene to scene, right? I mean, the
Mm-hmm.
flashback. Okay, no, we're in a delve. Inside it is the
Mm-hmm.
flashback. We do all that. Now, you said you did the one-on-ones because you wanted the players to have something to do with one another as they went
Mm-hmm.
along.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's a huge amount of procedure per character for just that one little benefit. How much of that is how much of that will go far enough?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for example, one thing I'm still not sure on, how many delves do we play again? If we really do this, right? We sit down, we got 5 people,
Mm-hmm.
5+, but 5 people, and we play.
Mm-hmm.
How many rooms does each of us go through again?
So on average, it'll be the way it works out averagely is it's 3 locations per player, and about on average about 5 rooms per location. So it's
Okay.
about 15 rooms per player
Yeah,
total
well,
across
that's
all.
75 fucking rooms. And you're saying after every
Yeah.
single one of these, I have to go talk to one of these bozos?
No, no, no. That's optional.
Okay.
You don't have to. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Now, this is
Yeah.
kind of an interesting point, though. If it's
Mm-hmm.
optional,
Mm-hmm.
just okay. There's several different brands of thought here, but one is that if I do so, then I can trade a card with someone,
Right.
and then there's also now, as I recall, I know what's in the deck. I just don't know what order they're in. Right.
Right.
Right. Okay. So I mean, when I slap it down to
Mm-hmm.
play a room.
Yeah.
But so I do have a card in mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so there is the sort of strategic element of saying I really don't like my hand and I'd like to change it up a little bit, so I'm going to have a meetup.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's also any other what positive interactions were you interested in?
Yeah. See, that's why I'm saying the rooms are a little the meetups are a little foggy, because what I imagined them being, right, was like little mini therapy sessions,
Well, no,
right?
but the big
Yeah.
ones like that. The
Well,
one
I
where
was
they
even
all get
imagining.
together.
Well, the ones where they all get together are like that too.
Yeah.
But I kind of even imagined they're sort of like what I kind of imagined them sort of being was, you're also, so everybody's seeing these flashbacks and seeing these things, right? This idea that you can have a moment where it's like, no, you know what? I really want to connect to your character. And I really want to have a moment where we share or we connect over this thing that I've been seeing across our flashbacks, right? It's like a moment to have like that shared commonality and like bring into the fiction like deepening or commentary or something like that on what's going on, right? It's a way to connect over, one on one with what's been happening to you.
Stick with me on the doing it 75 times.
Okay.
All right, because
Yeah.
if there is a mechanical benefit, then I'm going to do it every time.
Mm-hmm.
And if there is no mechanical benefit, then I may say what, in other words, I'm having a hard time seeing whether it's, a good option here.
Mm-hmm.
If it is merely for the interconnection,
Mm-hmm.
and if you want that to be authentic and to be non-strategic,
Mm-hmm.
take away the card exchange.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, it's no good unless they want to,
Mm-hmm.
in pure fictional terms.
Mm-hmm.
I think that that's kind of an interesting possibility.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because, and the only reason I'm saying that is because we are talking about somewhat harder in the moment card results during play,
Mm-hmm.
right? So we're talking about having more meat to those numbers and things inside the scene. And now, if you're looking for, I mean, I see it here. I see a clash between the desire to have a moment of human connection about this that's not a hallucination. I want to talk to I want to talk to something that's not in my own
Real.
goddamn head, right?
Right.
And so,
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
but if that's the case, then in this case, giving it a mechanical, strategic, what I call a breadcrumb. Hey, if you play your character's fear, you'll get a bonus die.
Yeah.
That sucks.
Hmm.
It's the worst mechanic
Mm-hmm.
in the history of mechanics. And somebody glommed onto it, and everybody seemed to think that the way you get people to get dice is to make them play their characters. And you get a little breadcrumb. You get a story point. You get a die. You get a bonus. If
Mm-hmm.
you play what it says on your sheet, your character's happy. When you're happy, here, have a bonus.
Mm-hmm. Well,
And
those mechanics are usually attached. Those mechanics are usually attached to negative things because you just get players that oh, I know I'm supposed to be scared here, but like obviously we're not really in danger, so I don't act scared. And people got tired of people playing horror games and not being afraid, right? Like I walk up to Cthulhu and tickle him.
Yeah, I know,
Right?
but
Like,
what they but so
yeah.
basically the idea here is that, well, if you're not going to want to do this, then we insist that you fake it.
Right. No, actually, yeah, I totally see that. Yeah.
And not
Yeah.
only
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
but how well does this work?
Right.
How well does
Right.
it work? And it really doesn't, right?
Yeah.